So maybe a bit broader than the idea of the just data, but trying to place the concept and the efforts around just data in the broader discussions at global and sectoral level in terms of responsible AI, in terms of the all efforts that are going around in global governance of AI. And I just recently came back from one of the meetings of the UN advisory body on AI, in which we are trying to come up with some global recommendations for the efforts around responsible and just and accountable and trustworthy AI. So giving a little bit this overall setup of what are we doing in responsible AI and how that can be seen as first, not only as a basis for just AI, but also the place where the contributions from just AI are just data are most welcome and most needed. So, of course, it cannot be a surprise or a news for any of you, all the potential problems that we are experiencing at this moment across the world with misuses or misunderstanding uses of AI, problems around the development, the impact of these systems. It is a growing concern and a growing cause for efforts around governance, around regulation, and so on. Of course, it's important to realize that all these type of problems and misuse of AI are not so much to be attributed to the systems themselves, but really mean that we need to push and to increase the efforts for human responsibility, because at the end of the day, the ones who are responsible are those that develop, that use, that maintain, that deploy this type of systems, and all the efforts that we are doing around is exactly to maintain that. If we, with this in the back of our minds, we also should look at what are we currently, we in general, people in general, doing with AI at this moment, and what kind of concerns or what kind of questions should come from that. So what is AI doing? What, in one end, some type of concerning replication and increasing of bias, increasing of discrimination, increasing of the gap between many different characteristics, like in this type of generated images. In other times, we can just think about, oh, it's actually generating quite fun and novel type of ideas and a novel type of concepts, like this Bosch washing machine in the styles of Hieronymus Bosch. And we, all of us, in one way or another, have in the last couple of months or couple of years experimented with this type of generated content in one way or another. And there is a lot to say about what can be done with it. There's a lot to say about what can be, what are the potential beneficial and the useful uses of this type of the generative AI technology. But at the same time, we also need to think about what exactly are these systems doing. Do we want these systems, and what do we want these systems to do? So, for instance, do we want systems to be descriptive and replicating the world as it is now, with all its problems, its bias, its inequalities? Or do we want the system to show us and to describe to us a world that we would like to have, but it's not necessarily the world we are living in? If we want this normative use of AI systems, then we need to really start thinking about who is setting the rules, who is going to decide what is right or wrong, and what are the implications of this type of normative development for society in general, in which there is some type of global decision for what we need to think, what we need to believe, what we need to act upon. On the other hand, if we are using AI to generate potentially creative type of expressions, we need also to start thinking about who is the owner of this type of images or this type of content, who is the creator of this type of things. Is it me that create the prompt? Is it the company behind the Stable Diffusion that was the tool I used for this? Is it all of us? Because all of us in one way, one time or another in our lives have contributed with the data and the images and the content that exists in the internet around all of us, and which has been used potentially in non-authorized ways. But anyway, it has been used by these companies to train the algorithms that generate this. We also need to start thinking about the impact of this type of generative technology on what does it mean for creativity, for the arts, for the artists in themselves. And then also maybe thinking about what is the role of the AI. Can we talk about AI as being the author? And we know that a lot of people are increasingly talking about AI, this type of agency type to AI, but it's a discussion that needs to be taken, and it's not a discussion which is easy or for which there is, like in the discussion of what is right and wrong, in which there is a necessary correct and absolute type of answer. So we do need to think about this. And we also need to realize the characteristics and the capabilities of this type of systems. The fact that the systems are able in a very successful way to manipulate language doesn't really mean that they are intelligent, and definitely not that they are intelligent in the same way that we consider people to be intelligent. And that also has impact to the way that we need to deal and to govern this type of technologies. It's also important to see where what are the sources for the type of problems, for the type of issues that we are concerned about on using AI. And this, the example that you are looking now is from the Mozilla Internet Health Report of a couple of years ago, in which as concerning as the skewedness of the world map that we are looking at, it's also important to realize that 15% of the data sets used in health applications at that time were connected to only 12 institutions, of which one is in Europe, one was in Hong Kong, and 10 are in North America. So also there, this type of ownership of data, or this type of ability to access and to use and to govern data being so skewedly distributed is also important, and is a concern that needs to be addressed also from the perspective of just data efforts. We cannot forget that AI systems are designed, and what I'm seeing more and more at the level of policymakers, but also at the level of the media, is this narrative that AI happens to us, that is something outside of our control, and that the only thing which can be done is to deal with the consequences, which is a very dangerous and very fallacious type of narrative, because these are systems that we organizations design. And as being a design construct, an artifact, we do have choices about how to build them, and we need to start discussing those choices, those options that we have about the design and the development of these systems, and also about who is going to decide and what kind of values are going to be there. It's also important that when we talk about responsible AI, the solution is not to build technology that can take responsibility by itself, which probably is even further away from responsible AI than I would like to be. But it's really about building solutions that are about the social, the people involved, organizational involved. It's not giving the responsibility to the technology, but is exactly keeping the responsibility with those that can take the accountability and can make these choices on how the technology is deployed, is developed, and is used. Talking about the concerns that are discussed around responsible AI, and one of them, I think it's very relevant also for the just data efforts, is the implications of data in itself and what people are calling the datification of reality. We can never forget that reality is always more than whatever data we can collect about it, that by collecting data, we are actually constructing the data, and therefore we are also constructing the reality that the systems have access to. By doing that, we are also, by definition, creating some bias, because we are constructing and taking decisions on what is part of the data and what is not. And by doing all that, and also looking at the efforts about the growing efforts around bigger and bigger and larger than larger data sets, we need to also be constantly aware of the paradox between the increasing amounts of data, but at the same time, the less insights that we are getting. So this quote of being data rich and insight poor is something which is very important to keep as the background for the efforts that are importantly and necessarily to be done around just data and just environment. Another of the issues that we need to concern about, and that are kind of the core discussions at Responsible AI, is the issue of power. Who is developing AI? Who is taking those decisions? And we all know that at this moment, mostly these decisions are done outside of democratic accountability and by very few and very specific types of people with very specific types of backgrounds. We also know that those communities developing these systems are also very poor representations and of the world community in itself. And maybe another type of concern that needs to be taken into account, which is the balance between the public and private access and opportunity for the development and the research in this type of systems, which we see by diminishing by the fact that most PhDs that are being assigned given nowadays are moving towards industry to get to growing to more than 70% of the PhD diplomas being for people that are moving to industry, and therefore this balance between public and private development and research, which is essential for a democratic and open and accessible way to technology, are also at risk. And finally, we need to look at sustainability, and it's very interesting and very enlightening to see that the current discussions, and this is really something of the last few months, are increasingly focusing much more on the use of natural resources such as water, and not so much anymore about the use of energy sources. But with next to the important developments on environmental impact and sustainability of the systems, we also need to take much more into account the human and social costs and the sustainability of the systems also from a societal perspective. I could talk a lot about governance, but one of the examples or metaphors I give to policymakers is that of a car, and none of us would very safely or very would want to use or to drive in a car without brakes and without seat belts. We also would not be using cars if we know that those that are driving them, they have no driver's license, and definitely not if there are no traffic rules and traffic signs around. That is unfortunately a bit the situation at this moment with AI. The systems that we have very little in terms of what could be compared to brakes or to seat belts, but there are also very little efforts concerning what are the type of driver's license that would be needed for the use and the safe and trustworthy use of these systems. And also given the whole discussion and the whole concerns at the global level in terms of an AI race or a game in which we are kind of fighting each other for a top position, it is also good to know that if there are no rules, if there are no regulations, it's also very difficult to determine who wins this type of game, and not going into the discussion of whether or not the idea of an AI race is a good narrative to have. But anyway, so we do need governance, like we need governance for every other type of technology, because we do need to have the guarantees that the use of the systems is safe, or is at least as harmless as possible to all of them, that all of us that are in one way or another impacted by the system or involved in the uses of the system. Towards this effort, there is a lot of activities going on, of which the United Nations is one of the most recent. It is good to know that there is a lot of alignment in terms of the abstract values and principles that are being proposed. But at the same time, because these things are so abstract, we are lacking more and more the tools to help us implement this type of abstract values. It's very easy to, or at least it's sufficiently easy to agree that we want these systems to be aligned with human rights and contributing to human well-being. Is much more difficult to know how to build systems that are indeed aligned with these principles. And even more, it is extremely difficult then to be able to check or to formally verify that the systems are indeed doing what we expect them to do. And finally, I would like just to finish here with this demystifying the constant idea that responsibility and governance and regulation is somehow against innovation. Firstly, we do need to have some guidance in the direction of innovation. So it's for all the parties involved, it's important to know which are the kind of directions of innovation in which is worth invest and which ones are not. So it helps all of us to innovate in a better way, but also by taking into account exactly what responsibility and what governance dictates, we are creating and opening areas for innovation which were not there before. Like in the car industry, there was no opportunity to innovate on airbags or seatbelts before the regulation was there. It is now a thriving type of innovation direction, and many companies are innovating exactly on those tools that are needed to guarantee the safety of the systems. And this is an innovation that is much broader than just the technology. So of course, we need to continue technological innovation of the AI systems, but also of these tools, the responsible AI tools that are needed to guarantee the trust and the safety of the systems that we are using. But this trust and safety also requires organizational innovation, requires regulation innovation, requires governance and social innovation. So we are, in a sense, opening the scope of innovation to a much more multidisciplinary approach. And having saying that, I would like to stop my presentation here, and maybe there is time for some comments or questions. Thank you so much for the opportunity.